inside this hall. It's playing up with me right now.
Turkish? Do you want to use ours? Do you want to change the adapter?
No, I'm good. Oh, it's not coming up. I thought you did. You just did. Let's use the other one. Make sure that
Right here. Oh, there you go. It's working out. You have two mics.
No, it's been playing up this evening somehow. There we go.
Ali, let me know when you're ready. Ready? A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to request Sayyid Ali Rizvi to please come here and begin the proceedings with the recitation of Holy Quran. Welcome him with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'll recite it slowly and loudly.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And now, without further ado, would like to request Dr. Hassanain Walji. Please welcome him with the loudest of salawats. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Suratul Mubarakah al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والحمد لله الذي جعلني من أمتي سيد المرسلين خاتم النبيين طه وياسين أحمد محمود أبو القاسم محمد من المحبين عطرة الطاهرين. أما بعد، قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفركانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم. صلوات. Moment I begin with the recitation of this very important ayah that will be the essence and the subject of our talk tonight. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving a value proposition of each human being when He says that we have created insan in the best of forms, in the best of molds. You know, a mold is where you pour some liquid in and you get a nice shape. Insan has been made in this best of molds, ahsani taqweem. And that is the core phrase that we want to remember today as we go through this presentation. But before I do that, I think we need to focus back on why are we here every night for the next 10 nights. Why do we gather here? What is the meaning of our tears? These tears that we shed on Sayyid al-Shuhada are a prescription for reform. Because that is what he set out to do when he left Medina. He said, I am leaving Medina for the Islah, for the reform of the Ummah, of the community of my grandfather. And I share this tonight again so that we have this idea of the importance of these nights, importance of the Azaa of Aba Abdullah, because every single tear that we shed, every time we feel the pain of those who are in Karbala, that represents a brief flight that our spirit makes with the spirit of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. It's such a spiritual thing for us all. And that is why we leave everything and we are here every night commemorating the Shahadat, which is going to lead up to the day of Ashur. I also say that we cannot just move with Imam Hussain alayhi salam in history. We must know the history. And it is a sad fact, I must admit, that we know what happened on the day of Ashur. And we commemorate these 10 days, remembering each one of the Shuhada. But in many cases, we don't have an idea how Imam Hussain was brought up. What were those times that led to Ashura and the early life of both Imam Hussain and Imam Hassan, including all the Aimma. I want everybody to reflect on that. That in addition to understanding what happened on the day of Ashur, we need to look at the lives of the Aimma alayhi salam, of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and see what we are able to learn. Well, for those of you who are interested, there is a phenomenal workshop that has been created at Harvard University. It is called Ashura at Harvard. The workshop is open to everyone, and if anybody wants to have a link, they can contact me, or they can go to the Ashura at Harvard Google and you'll be able to go to that link. It has several presentations that talk about the entire life of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And it is something particular for our youngsters to look at how the academia is presenting at the highest seat of learning in this country. We now have studies on Imam Hussain alayhi salam, which is a blessing in itself. And I do believe that we should take advantage. At the first go, we had over 700 people who registered for this workshop. Now the workshop is open. Anybody can access it, and I invite you to take some time during these days to go visit and learn, particularly for our young children too. Some special storybooks have been written. For example, one of the plots is that this is the day of Ashur, and Furat is talking to the clouds, and the clouds are talking to the spears, and the spears are talking to the tents to see what was happening. It's a very imaginative way of engaging our young in terms of what really happened and the messages that each of these, the river, the ground, the earth, the clouds, the sky, give to us as lessons, and this is something that needs to be studied. But as I say, let us not move with Imam Hussain al-Islam in history. Let us move with him in reality, in our day-to-day lives. Move with him with revolution and change, beginning with our own selves, and then within our families, and then within our communities, and then within the world at large, because the call of Imam Hussain al-Islam was not only to us of Hal min Nasirin Yansurna, it was a call, a universal call for all the time until the day of judgment. Every marginalized community that we have, every persecuted race that we have, Imam Hussain was calling out to the rest of the globe to say that you must stand up for social justice. This is the meaning of living and moving with Imam Hussain al-Islam in reality. And today, in this day and age. Otherwise, this beautiful couplet, which is translated in front of you in Urdu, says that Gehware Beshir pe roye to bahat. Upon the crib of Ali Asghar, eyes have flowed tears. Gehware Beshir pe roye to bahat. Gehware zindagi mein aankhein na khuli. That truly in the crib of life, our eyes seem to have remained shut. What a travesty that having Karbala as our legacy, that our eyes remain shut to the realities of life today. Inshallah, we will talk about the value proposition of insan today, and tomorrow we will talk about emotional awareness and ethical mindfulness. Today, the important subject is the status of a human being. Yesterday we talked about the flight that a human being can take if he or she wants to rise above the station of angels. We can do that. And if we choose, it's all a matter of choices. If we choose, we can go to that level of below that of animals. But today we are focusing on the status of a human being, that every human being is valuable, every life is valuable. This is the value Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts to us. And as I said, the potential is to go higher than the angels, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all of us, and as this ayah says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, that Allah created us in the best mold, in the best shape. So, how is this value going to be measured? How do we measure the value? Let me share an anecdote. A father was teaching his son as to how to value things. So, he gives him a piece of stone and say, go out and meet people, but do not say anything. Just show them the stone. And if they ask you, just raise 3 fingers. That's all you do. Do not speak. So he goes out there, he meets an old lady, shows her the stone, and she says, how much? And he raises his 3 fingers And she said, okay, that's $3, I'll take it. He runs back to the father and said, this lady offered me $3. So the father said, go to the museum. Go to the museum. No, sorry, go out to a pawn shop or somewhere where they might keep the stone. And he goes there, and the pawn shop guy asks him to say, how much? And he says, 3 fingers again. So I said, okay, there'll be $300. I will give you $300. He runs back to the father to say, I'm getting $300. He said, go to the museum. He sends him to the museum. The curator looks at the stone and said, we've been looking for something like this. I will give you $300,000. The moral of the story is that life is all about where you place yourself. Where you position yourself, you can decide what you want to be. And this is something that you need to understand, that you need to know your value. Position yourself in the right place. Life is all about where you place yourself. Don't settle for anything less. And this is what this story teaches us. And we will go on using that theme. I crave your attention. The father said that I wanted to show you that the right place will value in the right way. Don't find yourself in the wrong place and get angry because you're not valued. And never stay in a place where somebody doesn't see your value or you do not feel appreciated. This is very inspirational. Sometimes we are stuck in a place where we cannot think beyond. I say this, and I've experienced this personally. If one does not like what one is doing as a job, be it studies, be it a job, think about it. Maybe you're not in the right place. You cannot go through life being in the wrong place because you will never be valued. And this is something that we all need to understand, that you don't let other people put a price on you. You don't other people define you. You make sure that you set your own price, and you don't go giving discounts to other people in order to fit in or be liked. Stand up for a principle. Stand up for who you are. Stand up for that human being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And we're going to be talking about self-esteem and self-worth in a minute. But have that level of self-worth within yourself to say that I have been created in the best of molds and I will reach my best potential, whatever it takes. You cannot be mediocre. One needs to move towards excellence. Perfection is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Perfection is for the Aimma alayhimus salam. But for us, the journey is a journey towards excellence. As best as we do. If anything is worth doing, it's worth doing well. Let's not shortchange ourselves and try and do things in a mediocre way. We are better than that. Allah has created us better than that. And we are not going to shortchange ourselves. You are what you are because of the natural and the physical makeup that you have, traits that you're born with. And then there are habits. Continuous repetition of certain acts will lead to the emergence of a certain disposition. What do I mean by that? All of us have been gifted, differently gifted. Some are quiet, some are outgoing, some have a certain disposition, easily excitable, some are very calm. We need to understand who we are. And there are many tools that we are able to use, particularly the corporate world uses that to make sure that they tease the best out of you. So they give you all these MBTI and Myers-Briggs and all kinds of personality tests to see where do you fit in. It makes sense, but before they do that, you need to do it yourself, to yourself. For example, if you're born with a certain trait, You're born with it. But if you feel that the position you want to be in requires something different, say you're generally someone who is an introvert, and you're in a sales position, you have to at least present yourself, and you have to have certain semblance of not necessarily being an extrovert, but you need to flex to be what is required of the position that you want. It is possible. It can be done. You're not lumbered with what the trait that you have. You can change it. I'll give you an example. God forbid you write with your right hand, and your right hand somehow is cut off, you lose your right hand. What are you going to do? You're going to learn to write with the left hand. And over a period of time, you'll get pretty good at it, just as you are writing with your right hand. This is what we call learned behavior, that you can. But what you do is, if there are certain traits that you are blessed with, if you understand those traits, you put yourself in a position where those traits can best be utilized. And if you're a thinker, if you're a passive person in some ways, if you're an introvert, there are many positions, there are many professions, there are many passions that you can take up which suit that particular disposition. The idea is that one needs to understand oneself. We have all kinds of people in a society. You have the perfectionist. If it's not perfect, don't do it. A dreamer, somebody who has great ideas but no action. A worrier, the fears that would change. Anything that would change would spoil everything. Afraid of change. Crisis maker. There are people who have a problem for every solution and not the other way around. We have these people that we have to deal with. And if we have some of these traits, we can change them. But you can be whatever you want to be. And this is something that requires conscious effort. Shaykh Ustad Mutahari gives us a beautiful example in a book about Imam Ali alayhi salam. It's called The Polarization Around the Character of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. He talks about 4 kinds of people in a society. He said there are those who come to this world, and like animals, they will graze, they will do a job, and they will die. There is no impact of the society upon them, and they have no impact on society. They will leave. It's like cattle coming, grazing, going, and moving on. And then you have those, wherever they are, there is strife, there is trouble. These are people whose impact on society is always negative. It's always negative. The dictators that we have were, on the horizon. I don't even want to name them, from this podium. But you have these dictators wherever they are, there is trouble. These are the people who have a negative influence. And then there are people who are always very positive. They are nice with everybody. Well, Shaykh Ustad Mutahari says, and he was kind of looking at the society of the time, and he said these are the diplomats of the Muawiyan ilk. They're hypocrites. They're nice with everybody. They want to displease anybody. And he said the 4th kind of person is someone who has an influence, both negative and positive. And he said that is a kind of person that Imam Ali alayhi salam was. He had the best of friends and he had the worst of enemies. Because this was a man with a principle, this was a man with a mission. And that is the basis of saying that I will stand on the path of the truth. I may not fit in with everybody else's expectations because I have been created in the best of molds. Allah has given me these blessings and I will stand up for it. This is who I am. You look at my thumb. There is no other thumbprint on this planet the way that I have. That is because you and I are all unique. Our fingerprints are unique. In the same way, we are all uniquely built. Each one of us has his or her own mission. So, knowing yourself, Imam Ali al-Islam says self-consciousness is one of the most profitable assets of a person. We don't hear this many times. In terms of psychology, what the Aimma alayhi salam teach us, she's talking about self-consciousness. And he said this is one of the most profitable assets. These are words of Imam. Ponder upon it. So how do you see yourself? If you're not self-conscious, then how do you see it? Sometimes, you look in the mirror and you try and see yourself, and there's a beautiful Urdu couplet which says, धूल चेहरे पे थी और मैं आईना साफ करता रहा. That the dust was on my face and I was trying to clean the mirror. The philosophy behind that is that I don't have the self-consciousness to understand. I'm looking at the rest of the world and I'm trying to clean up what the world thinks about me. That is not self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is know thyself. Again, Maulana Muttaqiyyan Imam Ali al-Islam says that the self-knowledge is the most beneficial knowledge of all. This is the level of knowledge. So what you need to do is, you need to know your strong points and you use them for yourself and to serve others. And also know your weak points and you need to work on improving them. But one needs to be happy with what one is doing. One needs to be pleased with oneself when you're doing something, because that will reflect. If you're doing something grudgingly, it'll also reflect. So find yourself, be in a position, particularly my young friends who are climbing up the corporate ladder, make those choices very carefully. Do not let corporate America use you, and when you are 40 years old, they throw you off the heap and bring somebody else younger at a cheaper price to do the job that you've been doing. In the meanwhile, you have used up the best parts of your years in serving corporate America without having benefited yourself. One needs to be careful as to how we are being used, because we are unique. And the other thing is, do not compare yourself to others. Each one of us is equipped with different talents, different skills. So be happy with who you are and try to rise based on your abilities, not someone else's. And that brings me on to the subject tonight. The main subject is to discuss self-esteem and self-worth. These two words are sometimes used interchangeably, but they're quite different. There's a big difference between self-esteem and self-worth. And quickly I'll go through this, inshallah, we will finish in time. That self-esteem is how you think and feel about yourself. But this is external. You have those thoughts based on what other people are thinking about things and about you. This is external. Self-worth is that self-consciousness. It comes from knowing from within and believing your worth as a person. So self-esteem is external. Somebody else is defining you. But that's what you think. And then self-worth is something that you are defining. Self-esteem, in fact, is your perception of how others view you. It depends on the outer world. And self-esteem may go up and down. You get some good grades, your self-esteem goes up. You get bad grades, your self-esteem goes down. You care about your reputation. When your reputation goes down, your self-esteem goes down. Your reputation is somehow elevated, then you have a level of high self-esteem. Well, sometimes low self-esteem brings me on to the subject, the global subject we are discussing about mental health. This low self-esteem can be situational, it can come and go, but sometimes it can become chronic. And if you have chronic low self-esteem, if you're feeling that all the time, that leads to emotional and behavioral problems, which leads to mental illnesses and mental health issues. So low esteem is moodiness, feeling depressed, anxious, irritable, defensive, blaming others, less inner motivation. These are the things which are symptoms of low self-esteem. And there's an urgent need. All the time you feel to seek validation and reassurance. You want somebody to praise you. You want somebody to validate what you're doing. And this is a psychological thing where you are constantly seeking recognition and for you to feel better. And then you go and abandon some of these goals and projects because you cannot finish them. There's also high self-esteem. And that also needs to be balanced, because sometimes you get into that. And beautifully, Imam Zainul Abidin al-Islam talks to his companion, Zuhri. Zuhri was a man, a very good follower of Imam, but Zuhri had a habit of lecturing everybody. And every time somebody would come, Zuhri would try and lecture them and try and get them to be good Muslims and all that. Time came when, as Zuhri would walk the streets, people would change, go on the other side of the road to say, here comes another lecture. We know some people like that, and we kind of bypass. So Zuhri came to Imam and said, Yabna Rasulullah, why is it that people kind of are moving away from me? I try and do them a good turn. I'm giving them good information. I'm trying to teach them. I'm trying to pass your teachings over to them. And what Imam said is truly a masterpiece of public relations, a masterpiece of emotional intelligence. The practitioners of EI, tell us some of these things. But the way Imam explained to him, he said, oh Zuhri, the idea is that you must respect everyone. How? If someone is older than you, then think of it in this way, that you know the sins that you have committed. You don't know the good deeds that he has committed. Maybe that person is better than you. If somebody is younger than you, again, you know the good deeds that you have done. You don't know the good deeds that he has done, how many more he has done. So if somebody is younger, respect them. And if somebody is your peer, again, same answer to say, you don't know how many sins he has not committed, and you know how many sins you have committed. And therefore he may be better than you, and therefore respect him. A complete change to say the high self-esteem. So here, you try and say, okay, your blood pressure is fine, your cholesterol is fine, but your self-esteem is way too high. It goes up because we are now taking comfort from what other people think about us. Same thing. You go through life, it's like the dollar bill there. That nice, flat, new dollar bill, if I had to offer it to anyone, everybody would take it, right? It's a dollar bill. It's got value. Now, if I were to do this, if I were to take this and crumple that dollar bill, you would still take it because its value has not reduced. It's still a dollar bill. It's still worth $1. You go through life, sometimes you get crumpled. You get into situations of not of your making. Something happens and you get crumpled in life. If you have self-worth, your self-worth will be intact like that dollar bill. However much you may be crumpled. And therefore, remember that this is what we need to think about. But do not allow, as this saying goes, that what other people think of you is none of your business. What other people think of you is none of your business. What you need to do is have that self-worth to say that I am who I am, blessed with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I can give you no better example than the example of Hazrat Lokman. You know Hazrat Lokman, Luqman Hakim, he was not a prophet, but he was a wise man. There's a Suratul Lokman. And if you read the Suratul Lokman in terms of how Luqman advises his son through life, those are gems, literally gems, and I would invite you to really ponder upon Suratul Lokman. But there is this particular anecdote about Suratul Lokman. And he wanted to teach his son that do not rely on people's praise or their slander. So he said, son, come, let's walk. Some of you may have heard this story at the risk of repetition. He said, son, let's walk. So they go for a walk. And they take the donkey with them. And people said, what kind of people are these? They have a donkey and they're walking themselves. So he said, son, go get on the donkey now, because people are saying this. So he gets on the donkey. The son gets on the donkey. And he said, the people started saying, what kind of a son is this? The father walks and the son is riding a donkey. So they now swapped. The father sits on the donkey. As they're going to say, what kind of a cruel father is this? The son is walking in the hot sun and the father is riding. And finally they both sit on the donkey. And people say, well, what kind of people are these? They're, such a heavy weight on the donkey. You never win. People's praise and standards should not be taken into account. It is who you are. So he said, and I quote, that, O son, do not tie your heart in seeking the pleasure of people. You are not likely to succeed. Do not pay attention to what people say. Instead, tell yourself always to seek the pleasure of God. This is what Hakim Luqman advised his son. So what is this self-worth? Self-worth, as I said, as opposed to self-esteem, is something that you're born with. And you have value. That value cannot be taken away from you. You can never lose your self-worth. Sometimes you may lose sight of it, but you will never lose your self-worth. Ultimately, the human spirit inside you will rise, whatever the circumstances may be. And this is what was so dominant. That self-worth was so dominant in every person who was in Karbala, to say, this is who we are. It does not matter that there are enemies. There's thousands upon thousands of enemies, and we are only 72. It was their own self-worth. And they knew exactly what they were going in for. So, remember this. My self-worth cannot be determined by others. It is what it is. So, what are the traits that you believe you are good, worthy, and lovable, regardless of what's happening in your life? Accept and love yourself as you are now. No conditions, no exceptions. Ya Allah, if you make me this, then I'll be happy. Be content with what you have, how you are. Believe in your potential. And this is something to grow, to learn, to change, to improve. This is indeed something that we all need to do. And you do not allow your flaws. All of us have flaws. All of us make mistakes. You do not allow your flaws or mistakes to threaten your self-worth. Because then you are confusing your self-worth with your self-esteem. Your self-worth cannot be taken from you. It's found within. It's inherent. It's inside us. And it does not rely on comparisons with others. That's self-esteem. Self-worth does not rely on any comparisons. It comes from a deep, healthy, trusting relationship with your own heart. We have been talking about Qalb Salim. The idea is that if that heart is an Azhar heart, and you have the faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has created you as the best of the best, then there is no question of you losing your self-worth. And tomorrow we will talk about as to how can you enable this self-worth that you have through the practices of mindfulness and self-compassion that you can. But ultimately, self-worth is the ability to see yourself as Allah sees you. I am more than my mind, body, emotion and behavior. I'm also a spirit which has been blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I will not go into some of these slides in the interest of time. But how do you build self-worth? You stop comparing yourself to others and get into meaningful activities of your life, helping others, generosity, humanitarian causes. And most important, find a goal that is bigger than yourself. Have a vision. Have a vision to serve humanity. Have a vision to do whatever. There are people who have invented things to serve humanity. Those are mind-boggling. These are the people who have self-worth and they find a goal which is bigger than themselves. And studies actually show, and I can personally attest to that volunteering has such a positive effect on people. And when I'm sometimes asked, what do you do? I say I'm a serial volunteer, because I get involved in all kinds of projects. And it gives me more satisfaction than anything else. But you know what? Do not wait. Because Samuel Johnson said, he who waits to do a great deal of good at once will never do anything. Or that if you wait until you can do everything for everybody, instead something for somebody, you will end up not doing anything for anybody. This is the quandary. I'll repeat that. If you wait until you can do everything for everybody, you want to serve you want to change the entire world, instead of something for somebody, at least do something small, you'll end up not doing anything for anybody. Do it, whatever it is, however small it is, do it now. You know, there's a NASA slogan, and that's why they got to the moon. He said, do it. NASA said, do it right, and do it right now. Go for it. This is the passion. And I'll share one last story, and inshallah we will finish. There was a man sitting on the beach, and he sees a young man on the beach throwing something into the ocean. He goes closer and he finds that there are so many starfish. You know, when the tide comes in, the starfish are left on the beach, and when the tide goes back, they're left because they cannot get back into the water. And in the hot sun, they usually die. And that's why you see billions of starfish dying on the beaches. And he saw this young man was throwing a starfish back into the ocean, picking up and throwing back into the ocean. So the old man looked at it for about 45 minutes. He could not contain himself. Maybe he has a Zuhri character, so he goes up there and says, young man, what are you doing? He said, I'm throwing this starfish back into the ocean. But he said, there are thousands of them. What difference is it going to make? And the young man picks up the starfish that he had right in front of him, throws it in the ocean, and said it made a difference to that one. That is what it is. That however small it may be, the idea is that one must do something. And finally, the comparison, I talked about character, that self-worth and self-esteem. That worry about your character and not about your reputation. Character is your self-worth, reputation is your self-esteem. Because your character is who you are, and your reputation is only what other people think of you. Don't worry about the reputation. As I said before, it is none of your business what other people think about you. That will make you an upstanding person who will not be moved by opinions. You will say, show me the data. Let me make my own judgment. You know, a man goes up to Hazrat Lokman. And truly, Hazrat Lokman has got so many stories that, you know, one could spend the whole night looking at Hazrat Lokman's stories. And a man goes up to him, he was sitting under a tree. And he said, can you tell me how long is it going to take to go to the next town? So Lokman looked at him and said, walk. He said, but tell me how long will it take me to go to the next town? Lokman said, walk. So he thought this must be a madman. The most wise person, he thought he was a madman because he was not answering him. So as he started walking, Luqman calls him back. He said, wait. He said, it'll take you 1 hour to get to the next town. So he said, but why didn't you tell me that before? I asked you twice, and you said walk. He said, exactly, I asked you to walk because I wanted to see how fast you can walk so I can judge and tell you. This is data science. Today we're talking about, give me the data. I'm not going to make any decision in corporate America, give me the data. Hazrat Luqman taught us that you do not give an opinion unless you have understood it, not just because you need to give an opinion. So this is what it is. And finally, the strength of character that we have. Imam Muhammad Baqir al-Islam has said, and I quote, that God has bestowed on the believer 3 qualities. Honor in this world and the hereafter, salvation in both the worlds, and fear of Him in the heart of the oppressors. This is what Karbala was all about. The oppressors were afraid of Imam Hussain alayhi salam because he stood on a principle. People were afraid of Imam Ali alayhi salam not just because of Zulfikar, but is because he stood for a purpose. It was that self-worth that is being taught to us, that here is a man with a principle, and truly we are the followers of those who indeed are our teachers. Well, tonight we also remember a story of forgiveness. A story where Hazrat Hur remembers his self-worth in terms of how he was able to. Can you recite a loud salawat? We get this mic working. There you go. It's okay. That's fine. This is a story of forgiveness. And I take you back to that fateful day of Roze Ashur. The 72 who were with Imam Hussain and Islam began going into combat, one after the other. And there was a man in the camp of Yazid who could no longer bear the sounds of al-atash, that we are thirsty, from the khaima, from the tent of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And this was a man who was wondering and saying to himself, but then I was the one with my 1,000 men who stopped Hussain to go to Kufa and change his route to be here in Karbala. He was wondering. He was making a choice. He was making the greatest choice of his life. He had a choice between hell and heaven. He had a choice between glory in this world and a choice between happiness in the hereafter. And Hur showed us that it is never too late to ask for forgiveness. Hazrat Hur chooses heaven. He chooses happiness in the world hereafter. In our lifetimes, we too come through and we have to make many choices. But he was restless and thinking what a grave mistake he had made. What have I done? He kept saying. Why did I put the son of Fatima in this position? Will Hussein ever forgive me? Will Allah ever forgive me? Will the Lady of Light, Bibi Fatima Zahra Salamullahi alayha, forgive me? How can I ever ask for that forgiveness? Well, and then his words were, Ya Allah, I find myself between heaven and hell, and I will not prefer anything to heaven, even if I am cut to pieces and then burnt. On the other side, Mu'mineen, just the reporters have said, and this is something this is hardly imaginable, that the horses were jumping up and down because they could not keep their hoofs on the burning sands of Karbala. And Yazid's soldiers were pouring buckets of water. so that the horses' hooves could cool and they could calm down. And as Hur watches gallons upon gallons of water being poured on the horses, he thought, so much water for the animals, while the children of Fatima are crying for a few drops of water. There is so much water for the animals, but none for the grandson of the Prophet. Al-Atash echoed through Hur's ears, and now Hur could take it no more. He calls his son and says, my son, I have made a terrible mistake. I brought such a pious and a truthful man to be killed. Please, my son, quickly take me to Imam Hussein. I want to beg forgiveness. And before it is too late, I'm ashamed of myself. Will Hussein ever forgive me? When the Khaima and Imam Hussein, Hazrat Abbas see some people coming from the opposite camp, Hazrat Abbas stands up to defend, and he says, Abbas, my brother. Imam Hussein says, Abbas, my brother, put your sword back. Those two men are not coming to fight us. This is Hur. This is my special guest. I've been waiting for him. And welcome Hur. And he welcomes Hur and said, my master, forgive me. Please forgive me. I'm extremely sorry for what I've done. I'm ashamed of myself. This was the spirit of forgiveness of Sayyidul Shuhada. Imam takes Hur in his arms and said, oh Hur, I forgive you. I assure you that my grandfather, my father, and my mother have also forgiven me. Indeed, Mu'mineen, this is the day of Ashur. Hazrat Hur fights gallantly and sends many of the enemies to where they belonged. Finally, Hur comes off his horse, severely wounded, calls upon Hussein that, oh my master, come quickly, let me see you for the last time. Hur was taking his last breaths, and Hussein placed Hur's head on his lap. Mu'mineen, I just want to finish on these two perceptions that I have, to say that when Hur opens his eyes, what does he see? He sees the face, the brilliant face of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Where is his head resting? It is resting on the lap of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Alas, it'll only be a few hours, if that. Later, when Hussein will not have the lap of anybody, Hussein's head would be lying on the burning sands of Karbala, and he would be gazing upon the face of the ugly face of Shamr. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. May Allah accept our azadari. May Allah give us the tawfiq to stand up for our rights. May He allow us and enable us to build our self-worth, so that we will be counted amongst the followers of Imam Hussein al-Islam, so that we can proudly call ourselves the Shia of Ali ibn Talib al-Islam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
وتوجه سهل. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، يا حسين بن علي الشهيد بكربلاء، السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين، السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباكر، السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق، السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر الكاظم، السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى الرضا، السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي التقي الجواد، السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد الهادي النقي، السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي العسكري، السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن القائم المنتظر المهدي، يا صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كامل الكفر والطغيان، السلام عليك يا دافع الظلم والعدوان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Alaikum salam.
So, like, are you like a professor, or like, you know what? Like, how do you gather your thoughts? I guess.
Been doing it for some time, you know, read a lot.
So you're a lecturer.
Yes. Yes. I
Like-
don't teach anywhere, but I do visit universities and I do lectures there.
But in general, you do lectures, like you do majlis. So, like, when you gather your thoughts, you kind of just like look through a whole bunch of different sources.
Like again with the street.
And yeah, this.